So moving on now to our panel, the theme of the panel will be most traditional businesses don't really leverage data in ways that really matter to consumers. The moderator is Maisie McCabe, Deputy Editor of Campaign. So I'd like to welcome Maisie onto the stage, and she will introduce your panel for the next 35-40 minutes. So please ask lots of questions. They're here to be interrogated, so please enjoy it. And this will be for the next 35-40 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I was thinking, actually, it might be a good idea for the panel to introduce themselves. So if you'd like to join me on the stage. Thanks. Yeah, there's the... Do we need one more?
I'll stand up, because I might have to actually run. I'm literally flying. Yeah. I'm going to be trendy. I'm going to Coachella.
Very trendy.
I know. I'm full on West Coast, I tell you.
No, so this session has quite a long title, so I thought we'd start with a little bit of an icebreaker and use an example of a brand or business that has used data in a useful way in our own personal lives. And then if you could also explain who you are and how you use data in your professional life. Do you want to start, Steve?
I think in terms of data from a business perspective, I've been working with a large airline and how they change the way they tune, maintenance to support, to better, well, basically to decrease the amount of fuel, to reduce their carbon impact, and to extend the life of aircraft. And in terms of impact in terms of flight, that can be a 5% difference in operating costs, which doesn't sound like much, but think about what people use as their primary differentiator for buying airline tickets. It's the price. So being 5% cheaper means you tend to fill your aircraft and you make money. From a personal perspective, as a personal project, I've actually been tracking for the last 3 years now my personal travel and carbon impact, and I travel rather a lot. So I need 1,000 trees to offset my carbon impact. So I'm going to go and buy a forest somewhere as my next stage.
And is that just so far? So
that's how many I need. Yes, basically, yeah. So I need a lot. I think the new forest is probably going to have to be repopulated for me.
Great. Nigel?
So personally, so for those who watch the BBC News, probably comes to no surprise you, I'm a mammal. I am a middle-aged man in Lycra. I have saved you walking in here head to toe in Lycra. I love my cycling at weekends and what's not. And of course, I get on the bike, and being a geek, I've got pedals that talk to me. I've got a computer on the bike that talks to my friends. I know my routes. I then compete with things like Strava. Strava's got data about how I do things, what I'm best at. I compete with complete strangers who wind me up because they've beaten me by 3 seconds on a certain segment of a road. And it's blinking good fun to go out there and compete against people you've never actually met, and then realize, how did he do it in 29 seconds? I'm 1 minute and 29. That's good. I also stand on a weighing scales every morning that talks to my wrist, to my Fitbit, that talks to my phone, and track my food. So I really am a data geek. Again, it's back to my wife. I keep saying it's for work, darling, it's fine. But I now know, clearly, I'm eating far too much, not exercising enough. I'm also competing with this man on steps, and I will beat him.
He's 20,000 behind.
We roll this out to work. It's great fun. So personally, data, I think we are living in a society where data is absolute king, and we will gamify everything we can with this sort of stuff. It's great fun. From a work perspective, I'm also the guy that sits there and says, I know you did that quote on the comparison site, and I know you've moved your car in and out of the garage, and your mum's on it, your mum's not on it, and you've tried every single permutation to get your premium from 1,300 quid down to 300 quid, and I'm the guy that says to the insurer, that guy's likely to be lying to you. It's fraudulent. It's nothing more than that. So I'm the guy that's out there trying to help you write better risk, or point you to an insurer that's happy to take that level of risk accordingly. Of course, all that stuff goes soon, because we're going to know what car you're in, you as the individual, back to the infinite individual, and so much more. You go out to Germany and places like that, and you take a picture of your registration plate, you get an insurance quote. No more 20 minutes on the aggregator filling and everything like your inside leg measurement. I mean, even though that still beats the times when I grew up, you used to go through the yellow pages, crossing them out, going, I've tried that one, I've tried that one, I've tried that one. So we're making huge progress, but the data that we can get from the aggregator sites and so much more to enrich our experience is just huge.
Ben?
Okay, so I should explain what we do first. My name's Ben Hookway. I'm the CEO of a company called Relative Insight. And what we do is turn language into data. So we're actually a law enforcement background company, and we can kind of catch bad guys online by understanding how they speak online and doing clever stuff with that. And for about the last 12 months, we've been applying this to marketing. And so we do things, we pick up very, very subtle things in language which have a dramatic effect on marketing campaigns. So for instance, we know that women in America who are 25 years and younger tend to say they wear makeup. But women who are 45 and older tend to say they apply makeup. So if you're a brand who's trying to target younger women by saying apply this makeup, it's awesome, you're getting it dramatically wrong and you don't even know it. And that's the kind of stuff we surface. I guess from a personal point of view, one of the things we do is we can tell a lot about you by the way you speak online, including your sort of gender and your age. In our profiling engine, I come out as probably between 35 to 39, even though I'm 42. So I'm delighted with that application of data.
Hi, so I'm Neil Firth from the MOD, and I guess you might wonder what on earth a bloke from the MOD is doing here at a conference about data and brands. But actually, there's a pretty strong read across almost everything that has been talked about so far into the defence environment, and I run the supply chain for the Ministry of Defence, where we have about 1.5 million different stock lines and about 40 billion worth of stock value, and vast amounts of data. And integrating this data is a huge challenge, and we're only just getting to grips with it at the moment. But there's some really great outcomes coming from it. I mean, from a practical perspective, we are getting so much better at in the medical area, and survivability of soldiers is incredibly improved over the last 5-10 years. And on the other hand, we're getting much better at killing the people that we intend to do. So, so fundamentally, so fundamentally, this is good stuff.
How do you follow that? I'm Lucy. I work at Contagious, which is a consultancy, a magazine, and we also run events. One of the things that we do on a daily basis is look at campaigns that run from all over the world and decide whether or not we want to report on them for our insight and research platform called Contagious.io. So the first example I'm going to use is one that I came across in a work capacity, and that was for Spotify. So I'm a big user of Spotify, along with 60 million other people. And towards the end of last year, they did an amazing thing called the Year in Review. So basically, you could find out what your year had been in terms of your own musical tastes. And what I really liked about it was that it showed you the bigger picture, because they had so much data at their fingertips, they could slice it a million different ways. So you could find out what they were playing in Brazil when they had that really humiliating World Cup game last year. You could find out what they were playing in Colorado when they legalized marijuana. So there are all these kind of really interesting little factoids and bits of information. So if you haven't done it yet, I think you can still do it. So go on and have a play. And at Contagious, we very rarely see really good B2B campaigns. But I thought that was such a nice demonstration to potential advertisers on Spotify about what you can do with that granular data that the site can generate. From a personal aspect, there's an election coming up. I'm sure you're all very excited about that. And the Labour Party last year did a really beautiful, very sweet little data-driven thing where they wanted to remind people that they'd actually been responsible for bringing in the NHS straight after the war. So they did a thing where you could find out what number NHS baby you were. So you just went to a site, tapped in your date of birth. That was the only piece of personal information you had to share. And then they would tell you what number baby you were on the NHS, and you could share that on your social media platforms. So really, really simple idea, but very emotive on two levels. One is because, it's quite a nice piece of information to know about yourself, but the second thing they did was, while you were doing it, they flashed up the number of NHS babies that were being born on maternity wards around the country while you were doing it. So when I did it, it was 47. And, it just kind of nice little bit of real-time data overlaid on the initial idea, which just gave it a bit more resonance, and was just a really kind of sweet bit of what we'd call it contagious emotional data. I think people often see data as being very, very hard and cold and very sort of, a little bit impenetrable, but that was very sweet, very emotional, something very shareable that they gave.
Hi, I'm Rachel, Planning Director at Havas Helia, and I spend most of my day dealing with data. Back on from what Steve was saying earlier, a lot of it's the old-fashioned type of data, and what I'm looking forward to as we get access to more information, more ability to drive insights from the big data. Hopefully, it will make my job easier, but also more interesting because it's going to give me insights into people's behaviour. From a personal point of view, I'm like Nigel. I track everything in and out using Fitbit and counting calories. And when I started doing that, it was great. I worked out, instead of just having to count what I couldn't have, by tracking everything I was doing exercise-wise, I could work out every single time I could have more cake. And that's brilliant.
Great, thank you. I guess if we kick off, do we think, is there too much data? How are businesses using it? Does anyone want to kick off on that?
I think one of the challenges about the data is there is so much data and there's more and more data available. And from a marketing perspective, the challenge is how do you use that? It's too easy to say we need all of this data. It's that bit that turns that data into information, and both from an analytical point of view and from understanding what it really means. And that's one of the challenges that's going on as people are getting to grips with this. We've got to upskill the people who are going to be dealing with it as well.
Since I've got a mic here, I would say that the real issue with data is the integration of the data and the linking of the data, and it's that area that I think is the real opportunity to join things up and then to work out how that information is properly presented and triaged, and intelligent decisions get taken as a result of it.
Yeah. And I think on that, in terms of the how do you distill the data? So saying there's too much, you're sort of giving up and saying, oh, I don't want to do it. Oh, can I just go my old school? The answer is, yeah, sure you can. If you don't want a job in a couple of years, go for it. So you've got to be able to leverage it, but to the point, how do I turn it into something I can actually make a decision on? And that's the hardest part, is it's not about too much data, it's about too little insight. It's about too little smart maths. It's about too little turning it into something actionable.
Yeah, I'd say there's a sort of another subtle layer to that. So I'm still counting myself as a marketing newbie, having done this for 12 months. But what you see is there's tremendous pressure on people in organizations to use data. Like, you've got to use data. It's got to be data-driven. And so there then becomes a massive temptation to use the large amount of data that is easily available. But just because the data is big and easily available, it does not mean that that is the data you should base your decisions on. But it's really, really tempting to do it. And we see, and I think social media stuff, there's lots of it. It's API accessible. It's a really big trap to fall into. I think it's really common.
How do you make sure you're using the best data then?
Do you want to spread that question around, or are you asking me specifically?
Well, no, as in, if people are, who can help businesses, I guess, make sure they're using the right data sets to begin with?
Well, obviously I'm going to say me. That's quite a tough one, actually. And I think in a marketing context, I actually think the creative agencies, if they were more data-driven, they have a much broader perspective on brand communication and specific product communication within those brands, that if you took their overall perspective and then properly applied data through that lens, then you can get fantastic results. And the example I gave at the beginning about where versus apply is something of that. But there's the creative agencies who properly apply data are actually few and far between, in my experience.
If I give you two examples to that. So back to the last question very quickly. Let's be clear. We are not going to stop, turn off, or slow down the volume or velocity of data that we've got. It is a fire hydrant, And if we don't pick it up, someone else will. So is there too much data? We don't have that choice anymore. It's there and it's coming at us at every single angle. We either deal with it or we die. And I genuinely mean work out a way quickly, get the right people in to help you. To your point on who's the right people to help us, I agree. Just look at people like WPP. I don't know if anyone is in the room from WPP. I think they spent hundreds of millions on data companies or products recently to try and get better at data. There was an article in one of the press recently about what Sorrel's up to on that. Very, very interesting point. More importantly, speak to your customers. The number of people that sit there looking inside out and go, look what we can do with all this stuff without working outside in and having a customer lens, or in my world, a broker lens or whatever else, is phenomenal. They sit there in ivory towers going, look at what we could do, and forget to test it with a client or whatever else. An example, two examples actually. One on open data, Steve mentioned it earlier. There's been a study that said, based on open data, can I give you an insurance quote that is as accurate as a quote I would get if I went to you as an existing customer? And I think there's very, very little difference right now. Amazingly, I can go to open data and get a quote without ever talking to you. Quite powerful, quite disruptive.
I just think part of the issue has been that people haven't been involved with those decisions, and data's become something a little bit underhand and creepy and sinister that happens in dark rooms. And I think actually some of the most successful things that I've seen in recent years have been very upfront, transparent value exchanges which have been based on data with consumers. So one example was the Dallas Museum of Art last year introduced a program where they said, we will let you have free access to our museum, and the more personal data you share with us and about your experience, the more benefits we'll offer you. So we'll give you free parking, or we'll give you 10% off in the gift shop, or whatever it was. And that's been hugely successful for them. They've got like over, I think it's about 90,000 members now. It's been absolutely off the scale because they've been upfront. We will use your data, but we will give you something back for that privilege.
The privacy thing's really interesting. I'll have this over in a second. Privacy is really interesting. I asked my mum, right? I won't say older lady, she'll kill me. But I asked my mum, can I give your data to X, Y, and Z? No, absolutely not. It's private. I'm not sharing that with anyone. If I gave you 10% off, can I have it? Yes, absolutely no issues at all. So the older generations see value by giving something back to get something back, completely buy that. What was more shocking to us, we're just about to release a study next week about millennials and their use, or their attitude to insurance and their use of data. I will hand this mic over quickly. 1 in 4 of them are prepared to give you a sample, I'll leave it there, if you can reduce their insurance premium.
I mean, is marketing as a sort of discipline, is it leading the way, or is it sort of lagging behind other sectors?
It lags, I'd say, on the whole. I'd say there's sort of two phenomena. One is this kind of grabbing the data you can easily get phenomenon. If I was going to be really sort of cynical, I'd say there's a massive amount of variance in data literacy, particularly in agency world. And the game is very often, if I can have 10% more knowledge than my client, I'll look like a guru. And they'll spend money with me. We were talking about this earlier on. It's kind of like you need to be one meeting ahead. And so this results in a bit of emperor's new clothes and I'd say a shallow veneer of capability in marketing.
I was going to say, in terms of, I firmly say, and I'm definitely going to stand towards the back now, firmly say lagging. I mean, I use the Amazon example again. They're not a marketing company. And Google, they're not a marketing. Serge Brin, I found that, he's a mathematician from MIT. He's not a marketing person. He created the best targeted advertising engine in the world. So is marketing leading? Good God, no. I mean, it genuinely is the problem. It's a great example of an industry that's been completely and utterly eaten from the inside out and transformed by people who aren't marketeers to completely change the way it works. And the challenge, therefore, is as more and more information comes available, more of these companies are coming in, how do you take it? And I think the example on what information sources do you use, you've got to start understanding what's relevant. My example of that is I work with a luxury goods company an agency gave a phenomenal piece of insight. Your products are considered expensive from social media. And the question was, okay, how many of those people drive Ferraris? Because if they do, I care. If they don't, I don't care. And that's about That was not a mistake Google would make. That's not a mistake Amazon would make. But it was a mistake that people, from a marketing perspective, made. And I think that it's absolutely a huge challenge.
Rachel, do you want to give the... yeah. Sorry,
I think
can't
it
see
partly depends on your definition of marketing, because Amazon does market. Transactional companies, supermarkets, all of these things have been using data a long time to do marketing, but it's been that sort of product-driven, direct selling things. If you're talking about marketing from the bigger side, which is about brands, which is about understanding how I can have a relationship and engagement with the brand, then yes, because it's harder to tap into some of those emotional things than a straightforward transactional one. But we are getting better, and it's been able to understand, take those insights to understand a great piece of why someone loves something or why someone buys something. Often buying is straightforward transactional. Long-term relationship is about love, and data we can help understand the love.
And so it won't be a data festival without a mention of programmatic. So do you think that's sort of helping or hindering brands from getting more value out of their data?
I think it's been seen partly as something that can help. It can get better targeting. I don't necessarily think that the reaction that some of it's seen, if you talk about programmatic, if you talk about the, I've looked at the dress on a website and it's now following me around the internet, that reaction is actually hindering. It's a negative reaction. I've looked at it, I haven't bought it, I don't want to keep being reminded about it. But there are options about being able to target more in advance. It's about more predictive than reactive. And that's where I think it is going to be able to help.
I don't understand what programmatic means, but
Not sure many people do.
As a well-trained senior executive in the civil service, I will answer a different question, which is that which it almost comes back to the previous point, which is I think that the big issue at the moment is about the awareness of data at the very senior executive level and the ability of senior executives to understand actually what data is now and what can be done with it, and particularly into this predictive area. And I think it is just a huge void that we are desperately trying to fill at the moment. And it's that area that really, if you bring it back to marketing, branding, what the people with the data are really going to do is how do you actually educate that pool of people so that they know what they can now decide? Because so often people start with a hypothesis and go and try and find some data to prove it. And what I'm trying to say, particularly to senior defence executives, is stop. Look at the data and let the data speak, and then let's work out what we can do as a result of it.
I'm really excited by programmatic because this is just the beginning of programmatic. So it's, unlike most things, it's really it's in its infancy right now, but I think as the sophistication of programmatic increases, and you can capture things like people's preferred language tone and other emotional factors, and then target customized content and different media and so on, I think it actually opens up a massive number of creative opportunities. And it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more exciting.
I just say be careful. So for me, I work in a regulated industry. And regulation has a lovely habit of killing innovation potentially, but also driving innovation. So you just need to leverage it in the right way. In the financial services world, no one wants to go through PPI ever again. Full stop. It costs the banks billions. They don't want that to hit anywhere else. So we've got to be really careful with what we can and what we can't do from a regulation perspective as well. So I certainly, when you talk about marketing and everything else, I certainly wouldn't tar the entire industry with a single same brush. It goes back to the, we're mass personalization for a segment of one. It's back to the drive like a girl scenarios, back to the gender directives and everything else that will indicate and give us guidance as to what we are allowed and not allowed to go do.
I guess slightly on that, how do you think businesses should view the big tech giants who have potentially more data, about them than companies have themselves?
I think as a threat would be the first one, and as a partner as another. We were talking earlier about Twitter feed turning off the fire hose. is the challenge in the future is going to be, it's not just about the tech giants, but also they're going to retain that data. And also you want them to, because the volumes are just going to be too much. So how do I run my analytics on Google? As in, I've got some data, they've got lots of data, I need to combine all those things together. So there's competition, I mean, in terms of what those companies are doing in those markets, but there's also this ability of how do I start having a collaboration. So this sort of switch around, I think, is a massive shift. We've been used to doing all of our analytics and marketing analytics of, basically, I've got a marketing database, I run stuff against it, I've got a query, I've got a dashboard. Right. Now, the thing that's stopping you pulling all the data together, and I have lots of meetings where I say, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get all the data into our new great big marketing database. There's this thing out there called the laws of physics, and there's within it a constant called the speed of light. To move 5 petabytes of data, which is actually not that much in some of these things these days, takes years to do over the internet. Not a couple of hours, not a couple of seconds, years. The speed of light is your problem. So suddenly I'm in this world where I have to think about how are my analytics going to run in their environment? What's the question I want Google to answer, Facebook to answer, Twitter to answer, Experian to answer, TransUnion to answer? All of these massive data companies, how is my analytics going to run in their world? And that, to me, I think is the massive challenge coming, that that a lot of people really, it's a big mental shift, because I'm used to basically, I've got all my data to the point Nigel said, inside, I look inside my walls. To really execute in the future is going to think about those people as competition, but also as collaboration of my data, my analytics is going to run around the world. And how on earth do I do that? And what does that mean? And when does it run? It's a different way of thinking about analytics.
Lucy, is this something that you've come across at Contagious?
Yes, quite a lot. In fact, I was looking at something yesterday that was a McKinsey report that taps into quite a lot of what you're saying. I think it says something like about 96% of marketing leaders think that the biggest challenge going forwards is understanding data and how to use it to protect their businesses from disruption. Yet only 25% of that same sample of marketing leaders believe that there is actually, currently the capacity to understand those analytics. And that's kind of sobering. You think actually, a quarter of people running marketing just do not get what they should be doing at all. That's kind of sobering.
You look at the value chain though, so insurance, scared, traditional industry, lots of innovators out there as well, so don't take me wrong, it's not all that dull and boring, it's actually really, really exciting right now. Everyone's going, GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, they're going to disrupt our world. In my personal opinion says absolutely not. So just understand how you create or orchestrate partnerships that differentiate. Google's going to be your data provider or help provide data. Amazon, my God, if Amazon's supply chain worked for insurance companies and your house claim, and in fact, there's examples out there today, Aviva do. If anyone's got house insurance with Aviva, you call up and say your iPad's broken or whatever else, you will literally get the Amazon voucher while you're on the phone still. There's some cool things that are going on out there. Apple from a brand perspective, and Facebook from a community perspective. So there's already companies in Germany doing things like Friendsure, where you can pick your friends you want to insure yourselves with and go, actually, Steve's a good driver, Steve's a bad driver, don't want to insure with him, and you pick your communities of who you're going to go and do things with. So for me, it's the opportunity to orchestrate and create new partnerships I think will be quite exciting.
So I'll just make a quick point about, are Google, are Facebook, are Twitter doing anything different, and is it a threat? I'd say that for those of you who don't know, what happened with Twitter about a week ago, there's a handful of companies in the world have what's called a fire hose license to Twitter. So they get access to every single tweet ever done and some profile information about those individuals. And that's historical as well. And when I say a handful, there were like 3. And then on Friday last week, Twitter announced that they were turning that off. And so therefore the only way you can get fire hose data is directly from Twitter. Now, I think that's actually a really, really significant thing. And I think it's going to start making other companies who feel that they own valuable data to be a lot more protective of what they do. And so it's going to introduce another complexity to the ecosystem about how data is charged for and accessed.
Cool. Well, I think it sounds like we could carry on for a while, but we've got just enough time for a couple of questions, I think. Does anyone have anything that they want to ask the panel?
Hi. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how organisations like Kaggle are changing the way that analytics and data is used in organisations?
I missed the name
Like,
of it.
what was the company?
Kaggle.
Oh, the data science guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with 250,000 registered data scientists, how organisations can leverage that and how it transforms how they work.
I think Kaggle's a great example. And the definition of the term data scientist is always one in terms of 250,000. How many of those are true data scientists, and how many of them are people who can like do a spreadsheet with a little bit of macros to the 10% more than your client. But Kaggle as a resource, I think, it's a mechanical Turk, effectively, model, right? Of I could submit a job and Kaggle execute it. So it gives you the ability to outsource some of those analytics. And I think it provides a first easy stage for companies to start using data scientists, getting that expertise in and pulling it in. I think one of the challenges, though, is where you use it as a Kaggle versus where do I have to actually build my own analytical capabilities. So as an early stage partner of understanding and exploring, I think it's fantastic. And I think for areas where I'm non-differentiating, I think it's really good. I think does become a question at some stage of, okay, at what stage do I actually need the mathematicians inside my walls? Because my IP is now based on that analytics. And if anybody knows how a lot of this data science stuff works, is really good data scientists are like absolute magicians. And their magic tricks don't necessarily work if you bring another magician in who works differently. I had an argument recently with somebody who was arguing between whether they were going to use quantum magnetism or quantum fluid dynamics to model certain pieces to do with information flow within an oil system. I had no idea about either of them. But the point is that very, very complex models, very things working. So using Kaggle is a great way to get early stage analytics, begin to understand this area. But it's also a question of your business to say, is my analytics my IP? If it is, well, I need to start working out how I own that and how I bring those people inside my firewalls and inside my business.
Your broader issue is talent. So the broader issue, full stop, across many of these things is access to talent. So we've got a bunch of data scientists that we've built up in some of our offshore centres, whatever else, to provide capacity. There is not enough people in the market to go and do the things you want to do, and there is a race for education, a race for skills, a race for talent. The tech companies that I've seen, the likes of SAS and a few other guys, are now providing answers as a service. So go and look at SAS Answers. They literally give us the data, we'll give you the answer back that you're after. So it's all about turning the question on its head to get access to that talent that's actually more and more rare these days.
Cool. Do we have any more questions? Could you say who you are as well and where you're from, please?
Hi, my name's Danielle. I work in Barclaycard in our propositions team. The question of talent is really interesting. I'm a physicist by training, and I came into the world of marketing with the same kind of ideas about data and things like that. Do you feel that there's a lack of routes in to marketing companies for people with analytical backgrounds? Because I don't feel that those sorts of roles are necessarily easy to find.
I don't know. I can do one from sort of a Silicon Valley perspective, which is interesting. Is you go and go and meet a lot of those guys. A lot of their marketing people are from a STEM background. A lot. So it's an interesting challenge, I think, as I go around the world. Is the mix is different? Is it difficult to be a marketeer with a physics background or mathematics background in some of these really innovative companies? Absolutely not. So I think maybe the challenge is more. Okay, so why is it that there's more limited opportunities in Europe, in more traditional businesses? And I'd say that's where the error is in the evolution. But if I look at marketing, I was with marketing from one of a very large brand who I can't mention from Silicon Valley recently, and the person who's working with in their marketing department their first PhD was in set theory, which sounds very dull, but actually is quite complex, and their second PhD was in string theory. So, which apparently they said was nonsense now, and they didn't believe in it, but they did do a whole PhD in it. They are a person responsible for marketing and understanding how they do product management evolution in physically manufactured products. So I think it's the real future. So the question is more is how are you taking everybody else's job, and how are these people, everybody else employing people like you?
Rachel?
So I was good. So there's a higher education element to this, actually. Relative Insight is actually a spin-out from Lancaster University, which is in the frozen tundra of the north. There's reindeer. And obviously, we came out of the cybersecurity department. But it turned out that Lancaster is also the #1 school of marketing in the UK. And there's also a course on the psychology of advertising. And these 3 units didn't know they existed. And we found it completely inexplicable. So we've spent quite a lot of time knitting together these different academic units and producing, and we hire quite a lot of people at Lancaster University. But now we know they've got the right combined skill sets.
I think it's going to get easier as the knowledge and the understanding of the importance of data is going to change. I'm a biologist by background. That's what I did my degree in. I did a lot of IT project management. I now work in marketing. The opportunities are to identify that as a realization of what's needed. They'll start looking for those people, and it will start off often in niche agencies before it goes to the wider world, and often clients' side are more innovative when they're looking for there because they're used to often research and different ways of doing things, so that it's going to get easier.
Do we have any other questions? Sorry, I find it hard to see you.
So, hi there, Flannan Hassett from The Drum. Obviously, data is amazing, but we fall into the category that we are still human. And we love to embellish, we love to lie. As a saying my father always says, never let the truth spoil a good story. So what I'm kind of leading on to say is, with all of this, and you go to your insurer and you tell them you have a garage, or you go on a date and you say you live in Muswell Hill when really I live in Wood Green. Is all this data forming a kind of divide between the human element of business? So if I'm sat there working and you know that, I'm getting stressed, or, does it take away from that opportunity to actually, become a hero, pretend to be that great person?
Yeah. I know. This is the challenge, right? Yes, data does change the ability to make those personal decisions. And look at historically how mortgages were approved. 40 years ago, it was done by a bank manager going, I reckon this person's a good risk. Yeah, that'll be fine. 6 years ago now, it's done based on, yeah, what the hell? They might be a crack addict, but we reckon we can do it. So now, obviously it's switched and changed. So there is absolutely, and this is, I think, one of these big contentions between what's the personal aspect of the individual and how do they retain control versus I need to run my business better. The point of the stress piece is, if you look at, the reason I use the financial trading is, these aren't little mistakes. It's not so much about somebody at McDonald's going, I tell you what, they overcooked that burger. It's more the question of, you've just done a trade and you made a mistake that's going to cost us 10 million. We can cope with that. You're about to double down on stupid and cost us 100 million. And then double down on stupid and cost us $1 billion. And then double down on stupid and cost us $7 billion. And suddenly, we've got a genuine issue here. Yes, there is absolutely a challenge of that. How do you retain the personal piece? And how do you ensure that the data doesn't become a dictatorship in terms of, it is always this answer? And I'll give you an example of analytics when we've been doing some pieces around looking at football and sport as a piece. Lionel Messi was a under-height person who needed human growth hormone in order to get to a height where he'd even be competitive in football. You'd be insane to say that person was the best player in the world when he was 10 years old, but he is the best person in the world. So one thing that analytics can really do is help you to predict the massive pieces, but not necessarily to predict the truly exceptional. And you've always got to be careful with that.
Reminds me of the film Moneyball. Whoever's seen that? Quite a cool film for the data keep. On the question, it's good and bad, right? So who in the room is not on LinkedIn? Okay, I know it's any hands not to go up. Everyone's on LinkedIn. Before you go to a meeting, you go and check them out. Who am I going to see? What connections have we got in common? I am a happily married man. I would hate to be single. My single friends right now, what they do is check each other out, stalk each other on Facebook or Twitter. I wouldn't even know where to start. So yeah, I worry the life out of it. Never let a fact get in the way of a good story. So, yeah.
Is there any read across this, Neil, in the MOD?
Yeah, I would just say that the data would have said we'd have lost the Second World War and then we'd have all been speaking German.
I think we've got maybe time for one more question. If anyone has one. Yeah. Well done. Yeah,
We're good.
cool. Well, thank you very much, guys, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.